He promised to be gentle that night, but he took my trust before I could give my heart. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. That night was supposed to be gentle. Just a promise, a contract, and silence. But by morning, the only thing he had taken was her trust. The soft hum of rain brushed against the tall windows of the Cole estate, each droplet echoing the unease inside her chest. Ella stood before the mirror in a white dress that wasn't really hers. It had been chosen. Not for love, but for appearance. The silk shimmered under the chandelier, perfect and cold, like the man waiting downstairs, Adrian Cole, a name the city spoke, with awe and fear. The man who rebuilt an empire from ashes and who had now bought himself a wife for one winter. Ella's hands trembled as she fastened the last pearl on her veil. She could still hear her father's voice from that desperate night. If you don't agree, we'll lose everything. The house, your mother's hospital bills, all gone. And so she said yes to a man she barely knew, to a marriage written on paper, not in hearts. The door creaked open. Adrian stood there, tall in a black suit, his tie precise, his face unreadable. He placed a single folder on the vanity table beside her reflection. 3 clauses, he said, his tone calm but distant. No love, no interference in my affairs, and no lies. He paused, his gaze softening just a fraction. I will be gentle, Ella. Tonight is only for appearances. She nodded, voice barely a whisper. I understand. But as he turned away, something flickered behind his eyes. Something colder than distance. A secret. Later that night, the mansion's grand hall echoed with polite applause. Flashes from cameras slicing through the dim gold light. The city's elite toasted their union. A merger, disguised as romance. Ella smiled on cue, her fingers cold inside Adrian's. He leaned down, his breath brushing her ear. Smile wider. They're watching. I am, she whispered, her lips stiff. No, he murmured, his eyes narrowing. Not with your heart. The words stung. She didn't realize how deeply until hours later, when the lights dimmed and the guests were gone. The quiet in their bedroom was thick enough to choke on. Adrian loosened his tie, his back turned to her. You can rest. The staff will handle your things. She hesitated. You promised to be gentle. He looked over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. And I will, but gentleness doesn't mean honesty. The air froze between them. Ella felt it then, the truth she hadn't wanted to see. This wasn't about marriage or duty. It was about control, about something he hadn't said yet. She watched as he poured himself a drink, his reflection in the glass dark and sharp. Why me? She asked, her voice breaking. Out of all the women in your world, why me? He took a sip, then met her gaze in the mirror. Because your father owed me something, he said quietly. And I always collect. Her breath caught. The ground beneath her seemed to vanish. She wanted to scream, to tear the veil from her head. But instead, she stood there, the picture of grace and silence. He turned toward her then, his expression softening as if nothing cruel had been said. Don't be afraid, Ella, he said softly. I promise to be gentle. But as he walked closer, the distance between them felt like a storm gathering in her chest. And when his hand brushed hers, not in violence, not in affection, but in quiet possession, she realized the truth. It wasn't her body he wanted. It was her faith, her trust. And that was the one thing she hadn't meant to give. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. Inside, beneath the weight of silk and secrets, Ella whispered to herself, "You can take everything, Adrian, but not my heart. Yet, deep down, she knew that by morning, even that promise might break. The night passed in uneasy silence. By dawn, the mansion that had felt too large now seemed to breathe with secrets. Ella woke to the faint hum of rain still clinging to the glass, her wedding ring glinting in the dim morning light, like a reminder of what she had traded. She rose quietly, wrapping a shawl over her nightdress, and stepped out into the hallway. The marble under her feet was cold, her reflection in the polished floor fragmented. Somewhere down the hall, she could hear Adrian's voice steady, controlled, talking to someone on the phone. The merger goes through this week. I do not care about the headlines. She will play her part, he said. Her stomach twisted. So that was it. She was a headline, a deal, not a wife. When he hung up, she tried to retreat, but his voice caught her. You are up early. He stood in the doorway of his study, sleeves rolled, eyes sharp, even in the morning light. Could not sleep, she said softly. I am not surprised, he replied, walking past her toward the dining room. Neither could I. Breakfast was quiet, except for the clink of silverware. The long table stretched between them like a canyon. She pushed food around her plate, appetite gone. You do not have to act so afraid of me, Ella, he said without looking up. I am not afraid, she answered, though her voice betrayed her. Good, he said. Then we can start being honest. He set down his fork and leaned back. You know why you are here. Your father's company owes me millions. You were the only collateral left. She felt the blood drain from her face. So this was never about us, she whispered. There is no us, he said quietly. There is a contract. Nothing more. The words cut deeper than she expected. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Then, I will hold you to your contract, she said, forcing calm into her voice. No love, no lies, and no cruelty. He looked up at her, surprised by the steel in her tone. You think I am cruel? I think you are lost, she said before she could stop herself. Something flickered behind his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Finish your breakfast, he said, standing. We have a charity gala tonight. You will smile, for the cameras. Wear something red. It suits you. When he left the room, Ella sat still, the echo of his footsteps lingering. Red, the color of strength, or maybe of surrender. That afternoon, the staff helped her prepare for the gala. Makeup brushed away the exhaustion under her eyes, but not the heaviness inside. In the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back a polished version of herself, wearing borrowed confidence. As the car pulled up to the event, flashes erupted from every direction. Adrian stepped out first, offering his hand to her. Cameras clicked as their fingers touched. Smile, he whispered, the word more command than request. She did. Inside, chandeliers sparkled above a sea of guests dressed in silk and ambition. Adrian navigated through them like a man born to rule the room. She followed, smiling, nodding, pretending to belong. Near the end of the night, an older investor approached with a smug grin. Mrs. Cole, he said loudly enough for others to hear. How does it feel to marry a man who buys loyalty instead of love? The laughter that followed was soft, but sharp. Ella froze. Adrian turned slowly, his expression unreadable. She waited for him to speak, to defend her, to say anything, but he only lifted his glass and said, Loyalty lasts longer. Her chest tightened. The guests drifted away, and she stood there, the lights blurring around her. When the event ended, she walked ahead of him to the car, the cold air biting her skin. He followed a few steps behind. Inside the car, silence pressed between them. Finally, she said, You promised to be gentle. I think you forgot what that means. He turned his head slightly, his profile hard against the glow of the city. Gentleness is a luxury I cannot afford, he murmured. She looked out the window, the reflection of her wedding ring, glinting in the glass like a chain. And in that quiet, she made a promise of her own, one he would never hear yet. If you built this marriage on lies, she thought, then one day, I will teach you what honesty costs. Outside, the rain began again, washing the streets clean, though nothing inside the car felt pure anymore. The rain did not stop that night. It fell in quiet sheets against the city windows as Adrian and Ella returned to the mansion. The air inside was heavy, filled with the scent of wet earth and unspoken words. He loosened his tie in silence while she walked straight past him, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor until the sound faded down the hallway. She wanted to disappear into her room, close the door, and breathe. But the echo of his words, "Gentleness is a luxury I cannot afford," followed her like a shadow. In her room, she sat by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. The city lights shimmered through them, distorted and distant, like her own reflection in this marriage. She removed the diamond earrings, the necklace, the ring, all borrowed symbols of a life that was not hers. Her phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. It read, "You do not deserve what he is doing. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., at the old cafe on Maple." Her heart raced. She stared at the text, unsure if it was a trap or a lifeline. The name was not signed, only the single initial L. She set the phone down and tried to sleep, but the thought gnawed at her until dawn. The next morning, the sky was clear but pale. She left before Adrian woke, slipping out of the gate with a coat thrown over a simple dress. The cafe on Maple Street was almost empty. The smell of coffee and old wood greeted her like a memory. In the corner sat a man in his 40s, well-dressed but unassuming. He looked up as she approached. "Mrs. Cole?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Who are you?" "Someone who once worked for your husband," he said quietly. "My name is Lucas. I was his financial advisor until last year." "Why contact me?" she asked, folding her hands tightly in her lap. Lucas glanced around, then leaned forward. "Because Adrian Cole is not the man you think he is. He is using your marriage to reclaim the assets your father once invested in. You were not part of the plan, not until he realized marrying you would make it easier to take everything." Ella's breath caught. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he did the same to me," Lucas said. "He ruined careers, erased people who stood in his way. But he has a weakness. He does not trust anyone, not even himself." He slid an envelope across the table. "Inside are documents that show what he is doing. If you ever need to protect yourself, use them." She stared at the envelope, her pulse pounding. "I do not want revenge," she said softly. "I just want the truth." Lucas nodded. "Then start with that. Sometimes truth hurts more than revenge." When she returned home, Adrian was in his study. Papers covered his desk, his jaw tight, as he spoke into the phone. "I said the acquisition must happen by Friday. I do not care about the ethics board." He ended the call and looked up. "You went out early," he said. "Shopping?" "For honesty," she replied without hesitation. His eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I am done pretending." She stepped closer, placing the envelope on his desk. "You want the company? Fine. Take it. But stop lying to yourself that this is about business. This is about control." He stared at her, the muscle in his jaw tightening. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" she asked quietly. "The truth was always in front of you. You just did not want to see it." For the first time, he looked unsure. "You think you can understand me?" "No," she said. "But I see the man who hides behind power. And I pity him." She turned to leave, but his voice followed, softer this time. "Ella, wait." She paused at the door, not looking back. "You wanted honesty, Adrian. That is the only thing I have left to give." Then she walked away, leaving him alone with the rain now tapping once more against the glass, each drop echoing the truth he could no longer ignore. For the next few days, silence wrapped the Cole mansion like a shroud. Adrian buried himself in meetings, while Ella kept to the far side of the house, her footsteps soft, her presence almost ghost-like. Yet beneath the quiet, a storm was building. Every time he caught a glimpse of her in the hallway, something flickered in his chest, a discomfort he could not name. She was no longer timid, no longer the frightened girl who had signed his contract. She walked with calm defiance now, and it unsettled him more than anger ever could. Late one evening, he stood by the window of his study, the city lights glittering below like distant stars. He held the envelope she had left on his desk. The edges creased from where she had gripped it. Inside were copies of transactions and board memos he thought only he had access to. How had she found them? And why had she not used them to destroy him? For honesty, she had said. The words would not leave his mind. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, but it tasted bitter tonight. The door creaked softly. Ella stood there, still in her simple dress, her hair tied loosely, her expression calm but unreadable. "You should lock your office, Adrian," she said quietly. "Someone might think you have something to hide." "You already found what I hide," he replied. "Then why are you still here?" She walked in slowly, eyes never leaving his. "Because I am not you," she said. "I do not run from pain, and I do not play with people to feel powerful." He studied her face, searching for mockery, but finding only exhaustion and truth. "You think you are stronger than me?" "No," she said. "I think I am still human." The words landed harder than she intended. He set the glass down, his jaw tightening. "You know nothing about me, Ella." "Then tell me," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Tell me why a man with everything needs to destroy everyone around him just to breathe." He turned away, the muscles in his back tense, under his shirt. "Because destruction is all I was taught," he said finally. "When you grow up being used as a tool, you stop believing in gentleness." She took a step closer. "That is not true. Gentleness is not weakness. It is choice." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain had stopped, but the world outside was still damp and quiet. He faced her again, something raw, breaking through his practiced calm. "Do you hate me?" he asked. She hesitated. "No," she said at last. "Hating you would mean I still care enough to feel. I am just disappointed." That struck deeper than anger ever could. He wanted to speak, to explain, to defend himself, but the words would not come. She turned to leave, and for the first time, fear clawed at his chest. Not fear of losing control, but of losing her entirely. "Ella," he said suddenly, "you think you see through me, but you do not know what it costs to build an empire out of nothing." "Then maybe you should ask yourself what it costs to keep it," she replied, her hand on the doorknob. "Because someday, all you will have left are walls and a name that means nothing." She left him there, the silence ringing louder than any argument. That night, Adrian did not sleep. He walked the halls of his own home as though seeing it for the first time, rooms filled with expensive art but no warmth, floors polished to perfection yet empty of life. He paused at the guest wing, where the light under Ella's door glowed faintly. He almost knocked, but stopped himself. What would he even say? That he was sorry? That he did not know how to stop being the man he had become? He stood there a moment longer, his hand hovering inches from the door, before lowering it slowly. The next morning, when he came down for breakfast, she was gone. The staff said she had packed a single suitcase and left before sunrise. On the table, where her plate should have been, lay the wedding ring she had once tried to believe in, gleaming under the morning light, like a quiet farewell. For the first time in his life, Adrian Cole felt something his wealth could not fix: emptiness. For 3 days, Adrian Cole lived in a silence that felt heavier than grief. The mansion was still spotless, the staff still polite, but the sound that used to fill it, the soft rhythm of Ella's footsteps, the quiet clink of her teacup in the morning, was gone. He tried to lose himself in work, drowning in contracts and calls, yet every signature he made only echoed the hollow space she had left behind. Each time the phone rang, a part of him hoped it was her, but it never was. On the fourth night, he found himself driving through the city with no destination, the streets wet from an evening drizzle. The red lights reflected against his windshield, like wounds that refused to close. He parked near a small gallery that caught his eye. Its sign dim but familiar. "The Art of Renewal," it read. He stepped inside out of habit, not expectation. The scent of paint and old wood filled the air. It was quiet except for a woman arranging a row of sketches near the front. His breath caught. It was Ella. She turned at the sound of the doorbell, freezing when she saw him. "You found me," she said softly. "I did not know you were hiding," he replied. "I was not," she said. "I was just beginning again." He took in the space-bare walls, a few canvases, soft light streaming through old windows. "You open this?" he asked. "With what?" She smiled faintly. "With nothing. Just courage. Sometimes that is enough." He exhaled slowly, something like guilt settling deeper in his chest. "I never meant to drive you away." "You did not drive me away," she said. "You taught me what I had forgotten, that survival is not the same as living." Her words were gentle, but they cut through him like truth always does. He walked closer, his voice lower. "Do you hate me now?" "No," she said after a pause. "I do not have room for hate, only lessons." She turned back to the sketch she had been working on. It was of a window rain on the glass, a single light glowing inside. "You used to stand by that window," she said without looking at him. "Even when you were near me, you were always looking out. I used to wonder what you saw out there that was better than what you had beside you." He had no answer. The silence between them was thick, filled with memories of what they had both destroyed. Finally, he spoke. "I came here because I read the news. Your gallery is hosting a charity show for underfunded artists. I wanted to donate." She turned, eyes steady. "Do not. I do not need your money, Adrian." "Then what do you need?" he asked quietly. "An apology?" She shook her head. "I need you to understand that power means nothing when it costs you kindness." He swallowed hard, his throat tight. "You think I am beyond redemption?" "No," she said softly. "I think redemption starts when you stop running from yourself." Her calm unnerved him more than her anger ever could. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. It was her wedding ring. "You left this," he said. "I kept it because I did not know how to let go." She looked at the ring for a long time but did not take it. "Maybe letting go is exactly what you need to do." He hesitated, then set it on the counter beside her sketchbook. "I will not ask you to come back," he said. "But I will ask for one chance to make things right, not with words, but with proof." "Then prove it," she said quietly. "Not for me, but for yourself." He nodded once and turned to leave, the rain outside softening into mist. As the door closed behind him, Ella looked down at the ring, her reflection glinting in its small circle of gold. For the first time, she felt no anger, only quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, he meant it. Outside, Adrian looked up at the sky, his face damp, not from the rain, but from something heavier, the realization that the only way to rebuild what he had broken was to become a man who could deserve forgiveness. Adrian Cole kept his word. The morning after he left Ella's gallery, he walked into his office at Cole Enterprises and did something no one expected. He called the board to an emergency meeting and handed in his resignation. "You are stepping down?" the chairman asked, stunned. "Effective immediately," Adrian said. "The company will continue without me. It deserves someone who remembers why it was built to create, not to conquer." The boardroom fell silent. For years, Adrian had been known as the man who never hesitated, never apologized, and never yielded. But today, he was done pretending that power could replace peace. He spent the rest of the day signing transition papers, shaking hands that had once feared him. By sunset, He walked out of the glass tower he had ruled for a decade and felt, for the first time, the weight lift from his chest. That night, he drove to a small community center he had passed countless times but never entered. Its sign read, "The Renewal Project Art, Work, and Hope." Inside, volunteers were teaching underprivileged adults how to rebuild careers and confidence. He watched quietly from the doorway until a woman approached. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. "Actually," he said softly, "I was hoping I could help." Over the next weeks, Adrian returned every morning. He donated anonymously at first, but soon began staying to paint walls, repair tables, and talk to people. It was strange at first, being seen not as a CEO but as a man. Some recognized him and whispered, "Is that Adrian Cole?" But he ignored it. For once, the work mattered more than the name. He learned to listen. He learned to show up. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Carol, the woman who ran the center, handed him a clipboard. "We could use a sponsor for the upcoming charity art show," she said. "Do you know anyone who might help?" Adrian smiled faintly. "I might know someone." The next day, he visited Ella's gallery again. She was in the back, arranging canvases. When she turned and saw him, her eyes widened slightly, but she did not step back. "You came again," she said. "I did," he answered. "Not to talk about us. I came to ask for your help." She folded her arms cautiously. "With what?" "There is a community center that helps people start over. They are hosting a charity exhibition to fund their programs. I think your gallery would be the perfect partner." She studied him for a long moment. "Why me?" "Because you understand what it means to rebuild," he said. "And because they need someone real." There was no manipulation in his tone this time, only sincerity. After a pause, she nodded. "Send me the details." The following month, the gallery buzzed with life. Volunteers from the Renewal Project filled the space, setting up easels and lights. Ella moved among them, guiding hands, adjusting paintings. Adrian stayed in the background, helping quietly. When the night of the exhibition arrived, the hall glowed with soft light. Guests walked through rows of artwork created by people who had once believed they were broken beyond repair. Near the center stood a canvas painted by Ella, a depiction of an open door, light spilling through. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "For those who found the courage to start again." Adrian stood beside her, his voice low. "It is beautiful." She looked at him, then at the painting. "It is what hope looks like," she said. "And redemption," he added. She glanced at him, her expression softer now. "You are changing, Adrian." "No," he said quietly. "I am finally becoming who I should have been." For the first time in months, she smiled. Small, real, and unguarded. Around them, applause filled the room. But for both of them, it felt like silence. The kind that comes when peace finally returns after a storm. And as the night ended, Ella realized something she had not expected. Forgiveness was not given. It was earned. One honest act at a time. And Adrian was finally learning how to earn it. The weeks after the charity exhibition brought a calm that neither of them had expected. Ella's gallery began to thrive. Not because of the publicity, but because people felt the honesty in it. She hired new artists, most of them ordinary people with extraordinary pain, and gave them space to heal through art. Adrian visited from time to time, never uninvited, always humble. He no longer wore his tailored suits or carried the aura of a man who owned the room. Instead, he came with rolled sleeves and paint stains on his hands, helping where help was needed. One afternoon, as he hung new frames on the gallery wall, Ella walked in holding a letter. "It is from the Renewal Project," she said. "They want to feature both of us in a magazine story about community partnerships." He smiled faintly. "I'm not sure I deserve to be featured." "Maybe not," she said. "But they believe in showing people that change is possible." He nodded. "Then we will show them." Later that day, a delivery truck arrived, carrying a large wooden crate. Inside was a sculpture donated anonymously to the gallery. It was carved from marble, the shape of two hands, one reaching, one letting go. Ella ran her fingers along its smooth surface. "Who sent this?" she asked. Adrian hesitated. "A friend," he said quietly. "Someone who understands what it means to hold on too long." She looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "Adrian, what are you still holding on to?" His gaze softened. "Regret," he admitted, "for the things I destroyed in the name of control." "You cannot fix the past," she said, "but you can choose what kind of man you are tomorrow." He smiled sadly. "That is what I am trying to learn." That evening, as they locked up the gallery, heavy clouds gathered over the city. The first drops of rain began to fall, reminding them both of how their story had begun with storms and silence. They stood under the awning, watching the rain blur the lights. "You used to hate the rain," Ella said. "It reminded you of everything you lost." "Not anymore," Adrian replied. "Now it reminds me that everything can be washed clean." She glanced at him, surprised by the quiet conviction in his voice. "You really are different," she said. "Maybe," he answered. "Or maybe I finally understand what you were trying to teach me." "And what was that?" "That love is not possession," he said. "It is trust." Her eyes met his for a long moment. There was still distance between them, but it was no longer cold. It was space, waiting to be bridged. The next morning, the magazine article came out. The title read, "Rebuilding with Integrity: The Story of Ella Brooks and Adrian Cole." The photo showed them standing side by side in the gallery, surrounded by paintings of light, breaking through clouds. People began to see Adrian differently. The ruthless CEO was gone. In his place was a man who understood the value of compassion. That night, as Ella locked up, she noticed a small envelope taped to the gallery door. Her name was written in Adrian's handwriting. Inside was a note that read, "I will not ask for forgiveness. I will earn it. Meet me at the old estate tomorrow at sunset." Her heart skipped. The estate, his former mansion, had been silent since the day she left. She hesitated for a long time before whispering to herself, "Maybe this is the final chapter." The next day, the sun set in shades of gold over the hill as Ella drove toward the place she once called a prison. The gates stood open now, vines crawling up the iron bars. The mansion looked softer in the fading light, no longer intimidating, almost peaceful. As she stepped inside, she heard music playing faintly, piano notes drifting through the hall. She followed the sound to the grand room, where she found Adrian standing by the same window where everything had once fallen apart. He turned when he heard her. "You came," he said quietly. "You asked," she replied. "So tell me, Adrian, why here?" He took a slow breath, his eyes glinting with something between fear and hope. "Because I wanted you to see what I have done. I wanted to show you that the past no longer owns this house, or me." The sun had almost disappeared when Ella stepped further into the great hall. For a moment, she just stood there, unsure of what to expect. The mansion, once cold and echoing, now looked different. The walls that had once held portraits of Adrian's empire were now covered in paintings, bright, abstract, alive. The marble floors were no longer polished to perfection. Rugs and warm lights softened the room. A piano stood near the window, where the storm had once cast shadows across their silence. Adrian's voice broke the stillness. "I sold everything that reminded me of power," he said. "Every symbol that made me forget I was human. What you see here is what I built instead." She turned slowly, her gaze landing on a small plaque by the staircase. It read, "The Renewal Foundation, a home for those starting over." "You turned this house into a refuge?" she asked softly. He nodded. "It will open next month. Artists, students, and families who need a place to begin again will live here. I wanted this place to mean something good for once." Her chest tightened, with a mix of disbelief and emotion. "You did all this alone?" "No," he said quietly. "You taught me how." She looked around again, her fingers brushing the edge of a painting. This is what you meant by proof. Yes, he said. Not money, not promises, just change. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The faint hum of the piano filled the air, the melody gentle but uncertain, like forgiveness, learning how to breathe. I never thought you would come back here, he said finally. Neither did I, she admitted. But maybe this house is not cursed anymore. He smiled faintly. Maybe not. They walked through the hall together, their footsteps quiet against the old marble. Every corner carried a story, the fireplace where they once argued, the staircase she had descended in her wedding dress, the door she had walked out of in tears. Now, each place felt different, healed. When they reached the grand window, the city lights shimmered below, reflecting in the glass like scattered stars. Adrian turned toward her. I told you once that gentleness was a luxury I could not afford, he said. I was wrong. It is not a luxury. It is a choice I should have made every day. She studied him for a long moment. And what will you do now? Keep choosing it, he said, even when it is hard. Especially then. The vulnerability in his voice disarmed her. For the first time, she saw not the man who had hurt her, but the man who had been trying to rebuild himself, piece by piece. I cannot promise that everything will go back to how it was, she said. I know, he replied. But maybe we can build something new, something honest. She hesitated, then asked, Do you still have the ring? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was not the diamond she had once worn, but a simple silver band, engraved with one word, truth. It is not a proposal, he said gently. It is a reminder that whatever we build next, it must start here. Her eyes glistened, the weight of everything between them softening at last. She took the ring, not to wear it, but to hold it, because it felt like hope. You finally kept your promise, she whispered. You were gentle. He smiled, his voice low. And you taught me that gentleness is the only kind of strength that lasts. Outside, the sky deepened into twilight, the first stars breaking through. The mansion, once a monument to pride, now glowed from within. And as they stood by the window, shoulder to shoulder, Ella realized that sometimes love does not return in grand gestures, but in quiet redemption, the kind that rebuilds what was once broken, not by forgetting, but by forgiving. 1 year later, the mansion that once symbolized power and pride had become something else entirely. The renewal foundation stood open, alive with the sound of laughter, footsteps, and art. The grand halls were filled with paintings, photographs, and sculptures created by those who had once lost everything. What was once marble and echo had become warmth and life. Adrian walked through the foyer carrying boxes of donated supplies, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his face sunlit and unguarded. Volunteers greeted him like an old friend, not a former billionaire. He smiled easily now, not the rehearsed smile of a man who wanted control, but of one who had finally found peace. In the garden outside, Ella was speaking with a group of young artists, showing them how to use light and shadow to tell stories. When she saw Adrian, her expression softened with quiet affection. They had not remarried. Not yet. What they shared now was more real than a contract or a ceremony. It was a partnership built on honesty and choice. As the students left for the afternoon, she walked over to him. You still work harder than everyone here, she said, teasing lightly. He laughed, brushing dust from his hands. Old habits die hard. And new ones? She asked. They take time, he said, but they last longer. Together they walked through the courtyard, where an old stone fountain had been restored. The water shimmered in the late afternoon sun, surrounded by flowers that volunteers had planted. Nearby, a small plaque stood engraved with the words, Kindness rebuilds everything that power destroys. Ella traced the inscription with her fingers. You wrote that, she said. You inspired it, he replied. They sat on the edge of the fountain, the sound of water mingling with the wind. Do you ever miss your old life? She asked softly. Adrian shook his head. No, I miss who I could have been if I had understood sooner. But then, I would not have met you. She smiled faintly. Life is strange like that. Beautifully strange, he said. Painful, but worth it. A group of children ran past them, their laughter echoing through the courtyard. One of them stopped to hand Adrian a drawing, a sketch of two hands reaching toward each other beneath the word home. He smiled and thanked the boy, his eyes misting. After the children left, he held up the drawing. It is strange, he murmured. I spent half my life building houses for profit, and it took losing everything to understand what it means to build a home. Ella leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. Homes are not made of walls, she said. They are made of people. The sun began to sink lower, casting golden light across the garden. Somewhere in the distance, a piano played softly, one of the students practicing for the upcoming recital. The melody was slow and imperfect, but beautiful in its sincerity. Do you remember the night we first met? Adrian asked. Every word, Ella said. You promised to be gentle. He smiled, the memory both distant and clear. It took me long enough to learn what that really meant. But you did, she said. That is what matters. For a moment, they sat in silence, letting the wind and the music fill the spaces between their words. It was not the kind of ending where everything was perfect, but it was real. They had faced the truth, survived it, and turned it into something worth keeping. As the light faded, Ella whispered, Do you ever think we were meant to find each other again? Adrian turned to her, his voice steady and sure. No, he said. I think we chose to. And as evening settled over the mansion that had once been built from ego but was now held together by grace, their hands intertwined. The world outside kept moving, indifferent and vast. But inside that small corner of redemption, there was peace, the kind that comes not from promises made, but from promises kept. And this time, Adrian Cole kept them all.